Typically on Mondays, we bring you guys a recap live stream from the week of fantasy football. But because the college football season, regular season is officially over, we're going into championship week and then into, college football playoffs and bowl games and all that stuff. We figured we'd bring you guys an updated rookie mock draft, Dynasty rookie mock draft, Superflex version of the first round and go really in depth on some of these players, especially for some of you guys that are maybe contemplating trying to try out Dynasty this offseason because you've never played it or whatever. This should give you guys a good taste into the 2024 upcoming class. It's a very good one. Going to be really fun. So, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head here. This 2024 class is shaping up to be up there with the 2020s, with the 2021s of the world. If the quarterbacks, the running backs get the draft capital we expect, which we will touch upon in this video, this has the makings of a very special class. So I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. Let's waste no more time and let's get right into it.
All right, so if you guys skipped the intro, this is the 2024 Dynasty Rookie Superflex mock that we're doing here. We're just going to go one round so we can kind of go really in depth on some of these players because we haven't really talked about them together. I've talked about them a little bit individually, but we are starting to see what these guys' prospect profiles are going to shape up to be because the season is over now and we just have maybe some playoff games and bowl games left or whatever. So I'll let you kick things off with the 101 and then we'll kind of go back and forth on the player and then we'll get into each pick and we'll kind of go in, I'll pick second, you'll pick third, I'll pick fourth, etc.
We'll talk about the player who's being selected and also give you guys a potential sneak peek at where they should be going in the NFL draft. So the 101, I mean, this guy's been the crown jewel of college football realistically since his true freshman year at Oklahoma. He transferred over to USC, won the Heisman in his second season. And we're talking about Caleb Williams of the USC Trojans. Obviously a down year this year in terms of expectations. They were expected to potentially fight for the playoff spot. Hasn't really gotten there. Shout out to that defense that they have over there in USC. But with Caleb Williams himself, there's no taking away from the fact that he is an absolute superstar level quarterback prospect. The presumed 101 in this class should be at minimum a top 2, top 3 overall pick. We'll get into why that is in a second. But with Caleb Williams, it's a crystal clean projection. He's top 20 in the NCAA in terms of passing grade, adjusted completion percentage, and he has 30 touchdowns to 5 picks this year. Like I mentioned, he was the Heisman Trophy winner in 2022, where those numbers were basically all top 5 across college football. 21 rushing touchdowns, so he does have that Konami code factor. He can move. We know what he's able to do out of structure. He's gotten comparisons to literally the best quarterback on the planet with Patrick Mahomes. Well, it's still a projection to get him there because obviously, not everybody can be Patrick Mahomes. If there's one quarterback prospect coming up recently that can reach that level of ceiling, that level of top 3 to 5 quarterback in the NFL, staple asset in Dynasty Fantasy Football, it's going to be Caleb Williams. He was elite under pressure as a sophomore, 77.3 PFF grade. That slightly dipped this year to 39.3. We saw, a lot of factors going on in that USC offense, a lot of miscommunication. I'm not worried about it with Caleb Williams. I think he is the clear-cut quarterback one for me in this class, and I do think NFL teams will take him with the first overall pick this year.
Yeah, we're not even into the draft season, and I'm already kind of irritated with the discourse around Caleb Williams with the whole he paints his fingernails and he's not a true leader and he cried with his mom at the end of a tough loss or whatever. Who gives a shit, man? None of us know this guy personally, and until I hear reputable sources say that he doesn't work hard or he's not a team player or anything like that, I'm going to just assume that this guy's going to be a franchise quarterback. Now, that can come back to bite you if we hear all this stuff and there is actually smoke and fire in that situation. But right now, it's just simply too early to tell. The reality is the prospect profile, the fact that he has, almost 900 rushing yards over his last 2 college football season, 6.6 yards per carry average, an elite arm. He's not the biggest quarterback in the world. He's 6'1", 205, 210 pounds, give or take. But I will say, the tools and the talent that this guy has in his right arm is going to get him drafted first overall, probably to the Chicago Bears, knowing that the Carolina Panthers have the first overall pick right now, and there is a little bit of a separation between them and the teams behind them. So I will say maybe future Chicago Bear, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and I do think if anybody's really worried about the size, it's kind of overblown in my opinion. I mean, Mahomes is listed at 6'2", 225, Caleb Williams at 6'1", 218. If you're just taking the overall size aspect, they are very, very comparable. I mentioned how stylistically they play the same. Again, it's not going to work for everybody. No, not everybody can be Patrick Mahomes, but if one person can be, it would be Caleb Williams.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of discourse going to be around Caleb Williams, but to be honest, it feels already like prospect fatigue in my opinion. So Drake Maye is the next guy that we're going to talk about here in this Superflex rookie draft because Drake Maye is also in his own right one of the better quarterback prospects we've seen over the last couple of years. 11th highest graded passer this year, down season, I would say production wise, because UNC has not really been that great this season. 23-8. Touchdown interception ratio, 75.3 adjusted completion percentage, raw completion percentage of 63%. So this year, and when I watched him in summer scouting, there was a little bit of like ball placement accuracy issues that I noticed. And it actually came to light even a little bit more this year, which is something I wanted to see him actually correct. And he didn't really get better from that perspective. So maybe it's mechanical. Maybe somebody can work on that with him. So that's, I would say, the biggest knock I would have on Drake Maye at this point in time. But I mean, the guy's like 6'5", 220 pounds, over 8% big time throw rate in back-to-back seasons. He's been top 3 in the country in back-to-back seasons in terms of big time throw rate. 579 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns this year. 1,400 yards rushing and 15 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. 21 missed tackles forced on 41 attempts this year as a runner as well. So just like, he's a dual threat, talented quarterback, essentially, honestly, like a more athletic version of Justin Herbert. And that might be like a wild comparison, but he actually, I think, is a better runner. And the tendencies that you see from him is that of like a running quarterback, because even though Herbert's a good athlete, he actually doesn't run that much. I would say, you know, Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence, like this is the type of comparison that we're talking about with Drake Maye. And I don't think the prospect profile is all that far off from a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who of course was considered one of the better quarterback prospects to come out.
Completely agree when it comes to Drake Maye. Like, if Caleb Williams wasn't in this class, this guy would have been the for sure #1 overall pick after that second year that he had in college. Obviously, like you said, with UNC, down year from the team overall, did lose receiving talent, obviously, with Josh Downs committing to last year's draft. That definitely had a big effect on this offense. Not quite the same smooth unit that we saw last year, but he still has absolute elite superstar level potential. And like I mentioned with Caleb Williams, if these guys live up to their potential, we're looking at legit top 4, top 5 overall assets in Dynasty Fantasy Football. You can make the case for the guy I'm going to be talking about at 3 going amongst this group and potentially at the top of this group. But in our opinion, the way we value quarterbacks in Superflex, the way the market values quarterbacks in Superflex, if you're getting an elite prospect profile going in the top 5, they have to be topping your board. So as good as this next guy is going to be, I do think you have to go with the quarterbacks at the 1 and 2 spot in your Dynasty rookie drafts. And speaking of that third guy, we can just transition right away. I'm a Michigan fan, but it's hard to deny exactly what Marvin Harrison Jr. is as a prospect. He's projected to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft coming from Ohio State University, and this is arguably the best wide receiver prospect I have ever seen at the position. He has elite size, 6'3", 220. He has elite size, 6'3", 202 pounds, uber clean production profile, and if you watch him on film, that absolutely backs it up in that case. I'm not convinced that he wouldn't be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL as soon as he steps on an NFL field. Like, you can't make the case to me right now that there are 10 professional wide receivers better than Marvin Harrison Jr. So just that fact alone, we know as soon as he's going to be drafted, he's going to be a top 5 overall pick. He's probably going to be going to a team like the Bears, the Cardinals, someone in that range. I think this guy's going to be at least the 3rd overall Dynasty wide receiver as soon as he got drafted. Now, I'm going to hear some people that are going to be arguing over Jamar Chase, over CeeDee Lamb, and I do think this prospect profile is valid of it. If he lives up to the hype, if he has 1,000 yards, 1,100 plus yards in his rookie season, this guy's got the opportunity to be the Dynasty overall wide receiver 1. And again, people are going to argue him for 101, 102. I personally prefer the quarterbacks because I do think the value appreciation ceiling is higher at that position, but no taking it away from Marvin Harrison. If he does live up to the hype, he will be a top 8 to 10 overall pick in Superflex.
Yeah, I think the reason that you would take the quarterbacks is what's transpired with the 2023 quarterback class, right? The 2 hits, I would say, CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, are more valuable than any wide receiver in Dynasty Superflex leagues, which is why, I mean, Drake Maye and Caleb Williams, both better prospects than Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud, respectively. These guys have the ability, because they can run, because they're going to be high picks, because they're highly regarded prospects in their own right. They're definitely going to have the ability to accumulate that value the same way we've seen CJ Stroud do it, the same way we've seen even Anthony Richardson in his short time playing quarterback do it so far. So yeah, for me, I love Marvin Harrison, and he probably is going to be the Dynasty wide receiver 3 at minimum the second he is drafted into the NFL. That's why he's in this elite tier. And if you guys are tanking right now, you better hope that you have 101, 102, or 103. Otherwise, there's going to be a slight tier drop off. I actually really love the guy that I have at 104, but in terms of what the market believes, I think these are the clear top 3 guys.
Yeah, and just referencing that as well, we're going to be going through, of course, our full top 12. We would, if we were to segment these as if we were to segment these guys, the top three are elite, franchise altering, first round caliber Superflex startup picks. These next two guys we're going to be talking about, still elite, top of the line, top 5 talents in this class. And then after that, 106 to 112, like we'll get into, a lot of projection moving forward. But I'll let you take it away. Who is your 104 in this class this year?
Yeah, so I have Malik Nabers, like I said, kind of in this realm of these top guys. Like I believe, at least for Harrison, maybe not for the quarterbacks, but for Harrison specifically, I think that Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison need to be discussed as wide receiver 1A and 1B in this class, not it's Marvin Harrison and everybody else. It's Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers and everybody else. And the reason why is because in the summer, Malik Nabers was kind of a exciting young sophomore, had a good sophomore breakout season. There was some things he needed to correct. You could clearly see that he was more like athlete playing football than he was football player. And this year, man, I can't believe the strides that this guy has taken. 93.1 PFF receiving grade. That is the best in the country. Not only that, it's the third highest mark since 2016. Only Devontae Smith's Heisman Trophy winning season in 2020. And then Andy Isabella, who played at UMass, it was a small conference, was graded higher. So among like SEC wide receivers, we're talking Devontae Smith of the last like 6 years only being better. And then when you look at his prospect profile too, when we look at Marvin Harrison's prospect profile, there's no blemishes, right? He's got the size, he's got the production, big school, going to be young, all that good stuff. Malik Nabers has essentially the same thing, right? He's going to be an early declare. He's going to be under 21 years old when he gets drafted. He's progressed every year of his college career. These numbers, the 33% target share and 91.9 PFF grade, these were a couple weeks ago. These are actually better now. 35% target share, 93.1 PFF receiving grade. SEC producer, 6'1", 190 pounds is good size, not elite size, but it's good size. Ran in the 4.4s coming out of high school. He was a 4-star recruit, probably going to win the Biletnikoff Award this year. He's third in the NCAA right now with 3.81 yards per out run, 1,545 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, 125 targets. This guy's literally doing everything he can be to possibly become a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I think top 10, top 15 is what we're talking about here. And if he has that kind of draft capital, for me, he will be the clear number 4 overall player in this class. Even if Penix or JJ McCarthy or one of these other quarterbacks were to go high in the draft, I would still prefer Nabers to them.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, very, very crystal clean prospect profile. He basically checks every single box, and you kind of have it mentioned in that tweet, but he is probably going to win the Biletnikoff this year. As good as Marvin Harrison has been, Malik Nabers has been a better statistical wide receiver thus far. Again, we prefer Marvin Harrison, but Malik Nabers, you can make the argument for him against any of these wide receivers we've seen in these last few years. I think he's up there with, the Garrett Wilsons of the world, with the Chris Olaves of the world, with all these elite wide receivers that we have seen come in and dominate year one. Malik Nabers is next up. It doesn't hurt as well that he's coming from wide receiver U itself.
Yeah, and in terms of like overall dynasty rankings, we talked about Harrison being like the dynasty wide receiver 3 the second he gets into the NFL. Like I could make the argument a sub 21-year-old Malik Nabers with what his profile is going to look like is a top 10 to 12 dynasty wide receiver the second he gets drafted 6th, 8th, 10th overall, wherever he ends up going in the NFL draft, because I really do love the profile, and there's not much I can say as far as like on film what this guy doesn't do well. He's explosive. He can run routes. He is great at the catch point. Like he literally does everything just as good as Marvin Harrison does pretty much.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Love Malik Nabers, and I do think he's very worthy of this 104 spot. A guy that I also think is worthy of that 104 spot and will be coming off the board at 105 is Brock Bowers of the Georgia Bulldogs. And you can make the argument that he could go higher potentially if you're in a tight end premium format, specifically in a full point or a 1.5 point premium for the tight end position. But in a typical, half point premium or a standard, non-tight end premium league, I do think 105 is the spot that Brock Bowers should be coming off the board. He'll get a stigma because people prefer, running backs and wide receivers. It's flashy every single year. People want those, flex position talents on their dynasty teams. But as soon as Bowers gets drafted, I think he's going to be valued as a top 3 overall dynasty tight end. 85.1 PFF grade this year, third amongst tight ends, despite being hurt and missing games. I mean, this guy in his first 2 years as a true freshman and true sophomore posted a 92.1 and a 90.0 PFF grade. Elite production for this guy as well. He's done it against some of the best teams in college football since his freshman season, dominated in national championships, dominated in SEC championships. There's really no blemish on his profile from both a production and a trait standpoint moving forward. He's one of the best yak tight ends we've seen come in college football in recent memory. if anybody's going to live up to the Travis Kelce or next Travis Kelce moniker, it's going to be a guy like Brock Bowers. I mean, this guy, since entering college football, 64 yards per game and 0.67 touchdowns per game on what's been a run-first Georgia Bulldog offense. They've been bullying teams. They've been demolishing teams. And yet this guy has still been able to produce elite tight end production. There's really no blemish aside from maybe if you want to poke holes at his size. But regardless, if this guy goes in the top 10 of the NFL draft, he will be, again, a top 3 overall at minimum, possibly even the Dynasty tight end 1.
Yeah, I think it bodes well for Brock Bowers that Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and some of these guys are producing in their rookie seasons, because I think there's a world where if those guys looked like all rookie tight ends and they, didn't produce at all to start their careers, then we would be talking about Brock Bowers maybe more in the 108 to 109 range, even though he's a great tight end prospect. But I think we've seen what a great young rookie tight end can do in terms of vaulting his way all the way up the dynasty rankings. Was anybody saying before the season that Sam Laporta could be the dynasty tight end 1 with a good rookie season? No, because that's not possible usually at other positions. Like, as great as, some of these rookie wide receiver seasons have been, like, it's hard to go all the way to the dynasty wide receiver 1. Like, only tight end is the position you can do that at, because the talent at that position is so scarce and there's not as many guys that are young foundational assets. So yeah, I think the second he gets drafted in the top 20 picks or top 15 picks of the NFL draft, Brock Bowers is probably going to be the dynasty tight end 3 to 5 at minimum. Potentially people are going to put him all the way up there in a tier with like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and, Mark Andrews, whatever tight ends that they have at the top of their rankings. So, and if Brock Bowers dominates before the college football playoffs and maybe into the college football playoffs, because Georgia's most likely going to make the playoffs, then he could get his third 90 plus PFF receiving grade, which again, Maye, good prospect, Kincaid, good prospect, Laporta, good prospect. They had one each.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Brock Bowers, you can make the argument that along with Kyle Pitts, he is the best tight end prospect we have seen realistically since Vernon Davis. I mean, Brock Bowers is an absolute stud. He's been commanding targets since day one. It's just really crazy how productive he is at that position, knowing that Georgia's up 40-0, 45-0 on teams. He's barely getting targeted in the second half, and yet this guy's still being able to produce at elite wide receiver 1 levels. It's kind of remarkable. You can make the argument from a pass catcher perspective at their position that Brock Bowers may be the best overall pass catcher projecting forward, even over a guy like Marvin Harrison or Malik Nabers. But because he's a tight end, because we usually see the value ascension at the wide receiver position, he has to be after those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would put him a smidge behind those guys in terms of what they can do, but at the same time, his position group is very easy to climb. Like I talked about, Bowers could ascend all the way to dynasty tight end 1 by like week 4 of his rookie season. Like, it wouldn't shock any of us if he came out gangbusters and looked like Evan Ingram on crack, which is basically what I've compared him to before, because body style wise, athleticism wise, he's very comparable to Evan Ingram, but Evan Ingram isn't quite as good of a football player as Brock Bowers. Like, you can see on film that Brock Bowers plays exactly as fast as he's going to test and all that good stuff. So let's try and speed through these next couple guys a little bit faster than we've been going so far. I'm back on the clock here. I'm going to go with Michael Penix Jr., quarterback of the University of Washington. The reason I'm going to go with Penix here is because if we were to talk about these quarterback prospects and, talk about who has a chance to go in the first round and, what are the odds that JJ McCarthy goes in the first round or Bo Nix goes in the first round or, name quarterback X, Jaden Daniels goes in the first round, whatever. I would put like the betting favorite to be Michael Penix Jr. There's a lot right with his profile and a lot wrong with his profile. The thing that I think the NFL is concerned with is the stuff that's right with his profile, because a lot of the things that are wrong with it is more so the rationale of dynasty players. And usually we see the NFL go against that. So what's right with his profile is he's on a very good college football team that has a chance to make the playoffs. 9.1 yards per attempt, 8th highest graded quarterback in the country, 6.6 big time throw rate. Which is very good too. And he has a good arm, and you can see that on film. 32-8 touchdown interception ratio heading into championship week. The tough thing about him is that the red flags show up on his dynasty profile because he's 24 years old on draft night. He has a trio of future NFL wide receivers with Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze we're going to talk about, and Jalen McMillan. All of these guys can play, and they've elevated the play of Michael Penix, but Michael Penix has elevated their play as well. So that one I'm not as concerned with, but the age and then mainly the medical history is his other big red flag, which the NFL will care about if it shows up at the combine, and that could affect his draft capital. Right now, we're projecting that he goes in the first round, which is why we would take him at 106. If he doesn't go in the first round, he's going to find himself all the way buried into the mid-second round range of this mock. But if he does go in the first round, he's an easy top 6 pick, in my opinion, because what he presents is kind of like a poor man's version of CJ Stroud. Like, he has the distributor playmaker type of mindset. He has a good arm. He's got good tools. He's not going to put up a lot of rushing stats, but he does have the arm talent and the ability to lead an offense.
We get another quarterback we'll be talking about later in the video. It's a lot of the projection basis when it comes to these quarterbacks. Like, if they're first round options, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, whoever finds their way into the first round of the NFL draft will be a mid-first selection in this case. So remember that when we're going through these guys. Michael Penix obviously finding his way at 106. I do think if guys like JJ McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix do go in the first round, they'll be occupying that 106 to 108, 109 area in this draft. So I can just transition straight into Michael Penix's teammate, Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Washington Huskies. He's projected to be a first-round pick, and so far this year, he's been absolutely phenomenal. 87.5 PFF grade and 3.09 yards per route run on what's arguably the best offense in the entirety of college football, with a real chance to make that college football playoff. We just talked about Michael Penix, obviously a very, very good quarterback in his own right, but Odunze has established himself as the alpha number one wide receiver on an offense with two other NFL caliber players, with Jalen Polk and with Jalen McMillan. That's very impressive. I mean, the fact that you have that level of wide receiver talent to be able to fight with in your own room, which is what Rome Odunze has been doing, very, very impressive. He's basically a lock, like I said, to go in round one. He has a size NFL teams are looking for, and I think he can be a day one outside wide receiver for the NFL team that selects him. With the quarterbacks and running backs being a little bit more of a question mark, again, some of the quarterbacks I mentioned, guys like TreVeyon Henderson, Trey Benson at running back that can find the way here, I feel more comfortable selecting a wide receiver at this point. But again, if the NFL draft happens, I wouldn't be shocked if Rome Odunze is the type of guy that goes at the 110, 111 spot in your draft.
Yeah, it is, like you said, all going to depend on where these quarterbacks and these running backs go. But as it currently stands, we'll lean on the side of safety and kind of take the wide receivers appropriately, because this class is quite loaded at the wide receiver position. So if some of the running backs get good draft capital, some of the quarterbacks get good draft capital, and you guys have late first round picks, it's going to push all these great wide receiver prospects down the board. And Rome Odunze, like you said, is going to be available at the 110. The next guy that I'm going to talk about is going to be available in the 112 area, or whatever the case is. So we're hoping for good draft capital out of the quarterback and the running back position, because even if you don't like those prospects, it's good news for those of you guys that have late first rounders and early second rounders. And with Odunze, I mean, he's been super productive. Like you said, the biggest sticking point for him is that when you watch him, you're like, this dude can play. He has the size. He has the physicality. He can run routes at a high level. And he's doing it with other wide receivers that are going to play NFL games on Sunday. And it's clear that Penix and everybody else in the stadium knows that he is the best receiver on that team. And that's going to get him drafted inside the top 32 picks of the draft, potentially the top 20 picks of the draft, if it's a very wide receiver needy NFL draft landscape, which it usually is. So the next guy that we're going to talk about, I would say, is being a little bit slept on in terms of the Dynasty community. I've seen a lot of people say that he's not a first rounder or whatever. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver from the University of Texas, has another pretty crystal clear prospect profile. The major concern with him is that he's small. And, he's listed at 6'1", 165, 170 pounds. So he is a slender receiver. And we just saw this kind of with Jordan Addison and with Tank Dell, who are both, by the way, playing at a high level in the NFL. Josh Downs, also a small receiver playing at a high level in the NFL. With Xavier Worthy, when you look at his profile, it is as good as it can get. 26% target share this year so far as a junior, 29% target share as a sophomore, 30% target share as a true freshman at 18 years old. The problem for him has been hands. He's had 5 drops this year, 4 drops last year. A lot of them have been, kind of bad drops as well. But he is you need to watch the tape to truly appreciate Xavier Worthy type of player. And I know that's like an annoying catchphrase, but you really do, because when you watch him and you see, 883 yards and 5 touchdowns, you would think this guy has 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns this year. Because when he plays, he's always open. I mean, he's missed on deep balls constantly. With Xavier Worthy, the thing that I know about him is that on his own, isolated from his offense and from his quarterback play, this dude can play. Maybe not a true alpha number 1 wide receiver at the next level. I think he would really benefit as being a 1B or a number 2 wide receiver, but that's a good thing. A lot of teams are looking for stuff like that. I think, range of outcomes wise, we're talking about anywhere from Marquise Brown to Jalen Waddle. That's what I think about Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love Xavier Worthy in his own right. And like you said, that mid to late first round area is probably where we'll go in the NFL draft. You're talking about needy teams in that area, like the Chiefs, the Cowboys.
He's going to run in the 4.2s, by the way. So he ran in 4.29 coming out of high school. He's going to run in the 4.2s at the combine, and that will basically cement his high draft capital status.
Well, a lot of teams need that archetype of wide receiver. We're seeing the NFL now. It's spread out. It's relying upon a lot of speed. And Xavier Worthy is the prototypical 1B wide receiver, I would say. Like, for example, if he landed on the Cowboys, you have CeeDee Lamb as your true number one. He can take on that Brandon Cooks role. I think he'd be a phenomenal receiver in the next level. And like you mentioned, like Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, that type of archetype of wide receiver. If you're telling me you can get a wide receiver 2 in fantasy at the back end of the first round of your rookie draft, it's going to be a smash spot.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is kind of the mid first round area. I think all of these prospects are easy projections. Again, if we knew RB1 in the draft was going to go in the top 50 overall picks of the NFL draft, then yeah, they would probably find themselves in this area as well. But for now, we're going to downgrade the likes of TreVeyon Henderson and Trey Benson, Raheem Sanders, Braylon Allen, Blake Corum, whatever running back you think is the best one in this class, just because we're totally unsure of where these guys are going to actually go. We have no idea what NFL teams are thinking. We have no idea what the community as a whole is thinking on these running backs. There is literally so much variance. Like, you could go search up top running backs in the 2024 NFL draft and read 5 different articles, and I guarantee all 5 of them will have a different running back at number 1.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's a lot of names at running back this year, but no Bijan, no Brees Hall, no like clear-cut number 1. So I agree with that. The guy who I think would be closest to running back 1, we'll talk about in a bit, but he has his own medical red flags. But let's just get into the 109. You mentioned a guy from your favorite university at Texas. I got to represent my boy, Go Blue. Big time win over Ohio State this week with JJ McCarthy, our starting quarterback. And I can't stress enough just how much he has grown as a passer this year. 91 PFF grade, 6.8% big time throw rate, both ranking as top 10 marks amongst quarterbacks in the college football landscape this year. He also has the 4th highest adjusted completion percentage at 80.8. And he also has some mobility, man. 283 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on 27 carries. And when you watch this guy play, his fuel for the game in out of structure situations is just so natural, man. This guy's going out of the pocket. He's keeping his eyes downfield. He's locating wide receivers, and he makes big play after big play after big play. The problem that I kind of find with him when I'm watching him play at times is if he has a clear rusher in his face and he has to kind of rush his process, that's when you typically see the mistakes made. Specifically last year, but even a couple times this year against Bowling Green, we saw it. Against Maryland, we saw it. Those are typically the turnover-worthy plays he'll have on the team. But regardless, seeing that type of growth we have seen from JJ McCarthy, 20-year-old quarterback, already getting that feel for the game, is going to have even more of a landscape to prove himself, with Michigan being almost a lock at this point to be in the college football playoff. Like, even if they lose to Iowa, they should be able to clinch the playoff. But let's be honest, they're not going to lose to Iowa. Once we see more of a sample size, we saw it against Ohio State. If we see it against Georgia, Oregon, Texas, some of these other big teams with JJ McCarthy feeling comfortable sitting in the pocket and delivering strikes against the top competition, I have no problem if the NFL gives me the okay that this guy's a first-round quarterback of propping him up to the 106, 107 area in the draft. He's really, truly the wild card, in my opinion. I think he's got a ton of talent. It's just a matter of the case where the NFL values him, because like you'll get into with some of the cons, he's a little bit small. He has kind of that sporadic mentality, that Zach Wilson factor, where he just makes a bonehead play every now and then. But from a talent standpoint, from a play extending standpoint, he, in my opinion, is the 3rd most talented quarterback in this class.
Yeah, I mean, big school Zach Wilson is kind of what we're looking at.
That's the moniker.
Here. And again, we're talking about the prospect. Zach Wilson was a great prospect. He wasn't, he's bad in the NFL, obviously, but as a prospect, he was a good prospect. And the tough thing, like I said, for me with JJ McCarthy is looking at how the offense is operating. Like you said, he's not asked to do what Bo Nix and Michael Penix are asked to do in their offense, but even Bo Nix, I mean, he throws a lot of checkdowns and that kind of thing. It's difficult for me to say that the NFL is going to look at this guy and not see anything other than a game manager with some physical ability, which is what I kind of view JJ McCarthy as. But this is a big, crucial stretch. Like, what did I say to you before this season? I'm like, nothing matters until the college football playoffs with JJ McCarthy, because they're going to steamroll every team that they play against. And the only games that matter are Penn State, Ohio State, and anybody that they play against in the college football playoffs. So we're going to need to see a little bit more out of JJ McCarthy the last 2 games of the season, last 3 games of the season that he has here against Iowa, and then whoever they play in the playoffs. So I'm excited about McCarthy. I think he has an ability to become like a late first round, mid first round Dynasty rookie Superflex pick here, like we have him ranked. But I wouldn't be shocked either if he was like a 3rd round pick.
For sure. There's a lot of question marks. He seems like the prospect that the NFL will probably be all over the map on. The encouraging thing for me is that we heard all season, like you kind of said, you can do it against the East Carolinas of the world, the Nebraskas of the world, the Indianas of the world. Go do it against Ohio State. Go do it against in the college football playoff. And if you watch that game against Ohio State, which you did, I'm sure a lot of people did, he made some elite NFL quality throws, like that touchdown that he threw between two defenders, got the linebacker turned, completely missiled it right in the spot this big. That is the type of throw you want to see JJ McCarthy have the ability to make. Now, should he have not thrown the ball? You can argue maybe potentially if the linebacker stays 1 second face towards him, it's probably a pick. But the fact he had the ability to pinpoint the ball like that is what the NFL is going to take away. A couple NFL caliber throws littered throughout that game, very efficient throughout. I am curious to see with Jim Harbaugh coming back, do we see potentially more so the 30, 35, 40 attempt JJ McCarthy rather than the, let's hold him down, Jerome Moore, run the clock, drain the clock like we've kind of seen these last few games? I am curious what he'll look like with Jim Harbaugh returning to the sideline.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there. So speaking of the Michigan-Ohio State game, a guy that actually won me a bet by not rushing for more than 80 yards in that game was TreVeyon Henderson. Henderson right now, I guess he would be considered RB1 in this class, given where we have him ranked. Like I said, anybody that you ask, they're going to have a different answer for RB1. I wrote an article for Flock Fantasy earlier in the year saying that TreVeyon Henderson is a bum, essentially, because early on in the year, we had like a 4-game sample size of him not making anybody miss, not really looking all that spectacular. And then he got hurt again. And that's been the problem with TreVeyon Henderson because, he was hurt in 2022. He had his outstanding freshman season in 2021, but last year he was completely banged up. Early in this year, he was banged up again. But since that injury, he's come back and he's the 25th highest graded running back in the country. He has 20% missed tackles forced over his last 5 games. He has 11 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per attempt. Injuries have been such a problem for this guy this year, last year, whatever year you want to look at his career. But the whole running back class in general is just such a mystery to this point that if TreVeyon Henderson continues to close out the season strong, the last game or two, whatever he plays before declaring for the draft, if he does declare, he's probably going to be the first running back off the board, assuming he tests well, which I think he will, assuming he has good size, which he does, 5'10", 100 or 212 pounds or whatever he's listed at. He has the ability to climb in the off season when teams are looking at his measurables and all that kind of stuff to become a top 50 NFL draft pick or a top, 2-round NFL draft pick, maybe a top 75 NFL draft pick. This running back class, I'd be shocked if the first running back is taken before the top 45 overall picks. I think we're talking about mid-second round, late second round, early third round type of players. And I think TreVeyon Henderson, at least as of now, has the profile that would kind of tell you, okay, great freshman year, banged up 2022, so we're going to throw that out the window. Early in 2023, we may throw that out the window as well. But he closed out 2023 strong, and that's enough to get him drafted in the top 75.
And I hate to make this comparison because people will be like, well, you're just looking at the helmet. It's helmet scouting. But TreVeyon Henderson's profile really feels like J.K. Dobbins all over again, where he had that breakout true freshman campaign. He was vaulted at the top of the Debbie circles. I mean, TreVeyon Henderson, people don't remember. He was legitimately talked about. Is he the first or second overall pick with Bijan Robinson? Like, that is the type of season he had as a true freshman. Obviously, that down campaign as a sophomore, banged up all year, was very inefficient comparative to his true freshman year. And like he said, very, very bad start to the season. He's been coming alive as of recent, had a little bit of a down game against Michigan, but I mean, Michigan's the number 1 defense in the country for a reason. So I'm not putting too much stock into that. He's fascinating. If the NFL decides, let's put our stamp on him, he is a top 45 overall pick, we cannot leave without him. You can make the argument he's a mid-first rounder in this class because I do think from a God-given talent standpoint, he is the true running back one in this class. It's just the medical red flags, not really knowing where the NFL is going to value him, is going to knock his profile to the 1-2 scenario, which is what we have him here.
Yeah, for sure. That's basically how you got to feel about TreVeyon Henderson at this point. Like, even the staunch TreVeyon Henderson truthers have to admit that, like, he's maybe the 7th best player in this class right now. Like, he can't be considered, before the season, we had TreVeyon Henderson, Raheem Sanders. Like, people were saying, hey, they're like 104, 103 in this class. And that's not what we can say about those guys right now. So let's get into the 111, a guy that's having another great college football season here with Troy Franklin.
It's almost funny because we talked about going into the year how this was going to be a strong running back class and there's going to be running backs littered in the mid-first. And then this was a wide receiver class that really needed to prove themselves. Well, the narrative has completely flipped. The running backs have disappointed and receivers like Troy Franklin have skyrocketed up boards. This guy's been absolutely phenomenal this year. Breakout year with that Oregon team who's probably going to make the college football playoff. I do think they beat Washington in that championship game this week, but I mean, he's just flat open balling out. 14th highest graded wide receiver in the NCAA, and he's been very productive. 1,349 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, and he is 5th in the NCAA in yards per run with 3.55. The spreadsheet guys are going to love him as well. Early declare, he was productive last year, 900 yards and 9 touchdowns as a true sophomore, and he does have those physical traits we're looking for. Legit 4.4 speed, 24% target share that he got this year. There's really no blemishes with Troy Franklin aside from where the NFL takes him, because he has the type of profile I think the NFL would value in the first round, but he might slip behind the Odunzes, the Nabers, the Marvin Harrisons of the world, because he might go in the top 50 rather than the top 20 like those guys might.
Yeah, he almost feels just like a second Xavier Worthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, they're very similar players. They both are, good speed. I mean, Franklin's been more productive, but, the scheme that they run at Oregon, and I would say the way that Bo Nix is throwing the football has been better than Quinn Ewers as well. There's going to be people that prefer him to Xavier Worthy, which I don't think is an outrageous take, but either way you slice it, I mean, we're talking about like the wide receiver 4 or 5 in this class that legitimately will probably be a first-round NFL draft pick, or at least a top 50 NFL draft pick. So yeah, Troy Franklin at the 111 here. Again, if you guys have 111, 112, 201, 202 in your rookie drafts, like you're probably going to be looking at players like Troy Franklin, and that's not a bad thing at all because he's a pretty solid prospect.
Yeah, I mean, the best comparable I would say would be the 2021 wide receiver class, where you had the couple names at the top, like your Devontae Smith and your Jamar Chase are kind of like your Marvin Harrison and your Malik Nabers. And then there was just a bunch of quality players after them that we could point to. So Troy Franklin would fit in that bucket. The previous class, for example, is as well 2020, like T. Higgins, where he's big, outside wide receiver, can affect all 3 levels of the field. And the NFL is going to take a liking to him, I do think.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2022, we had, Christian Watson, George Pickens, Jahan Dotson, those type of guys going in the late first round area. And I would say a lot of people have been pretty happy with those picks as well. So the final guy that we're going to talk about here in this first round mock, again, we'll do 2-round and 3-round mocks later on. We're kind of just getting a sense with what these prospect profiles are going to look like. Who are the best prospects in this class? How strong are those early first round picks? How strong are those mid first round picks? How strong are these late first round picks? Maybe we'll rattle off a couple names here at the end of the video as honorable mentions, but 112 here, I do have listed Emeka Egbuka, and coming into the season, I mean, he was the wide receiver 2 in this class. I would have said both of the best 2 wide receivers in the 2024 class play for the Ohio State Buckeyes, but his film, it was really solid as a sophomore. His size is really good, 6'1", 203 pounds, ran a 4.42 coming out of high school. Big school production on the same field as Marvin Harrison Jr. is nothing to sneeze at. 26% target share on the field with a guy that had 28% target share and who's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. That's something that you can really write home about Emeka Egbuka. The problem is his season has been pretty much a disaster all year so far. He lost CJ Stroud, which we know is a big deal because of what he's doing in the NFL. The injuries for Emeka Egbuka have really piled up in terms of like the nagging stuff that's kept him out. It's made him look a little bit slower. His prospect profile is really shaky, and it's going to be one that you just simply have to trust maybe the sophomore production or what you're seeing out of the profile in totality, because I think NFL teams should still view him as a top 50 NFL draft pick type of player. But at the same time, if they don't, he might go back to school, or he might, you know what I mean? Like he could be a 4th round pick or something like that. So it's really difficult with Emeka Egbuka, because I think coming into the year, if he had just sat out like JSN did basically, because JSN suffered an injury, he might be better off than he is now, because he's tried to play through these injuries and it's really affected his production.
Yeah, it's scary with a profile like this at this current point. We're trusting that he goes top 50 because, like you said, his second year tape was so good, but the NFL doesn't value that, or if the NFL is, concerned about the medical red flags and this guy falls to day 3, I think this is the most volatile player on this list, in my opinion. We got a sense, for example, even the quarterbacks we pretty much can sum up as being, top 50 overall draft picks. With Emeka Egbuka, it really just depends on if a team falls in love with him.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we did a Devy draft last year, and I took Emeka Egbuka in the first round, and I took Malik Nabers in the second round. And those guys, one guy has gone way up, and one guy has gone way down. So, kind of a net neutral for me there. So, I mean, that is the end of our first round mock draft. Again, there's a lot of names that we could have talked about as guys that just kind of missed the cut. I mean, Trey Benson at running back, Raheem Sanders at running back, Blake Corum at running back, Braylon Allen at running back, other quarterbacks that could get first round draft capital, like Jaden Daniels, for example, who is probably on track to win the Heisman Trophy, but he is 185 pounds soaking wet. So I think the NFL is going to have a big time problem with his size. But of course, if he gets draft capital, he's going to be good because he runs the ball like crazy. Bo Nix also gotten a lot of first round buzz from what I've seen as well. If either of those two guys go in the first round, they would probably push some of these wide receivers like Troy Franklin and Emeka Egbuka down the board a little bit. And then Jatavian Sanders at tight end also would probably factor into that conversation at the end of the first round area.
A guy like Keon Coleman, for example, has been talked about as a potential top 20 pick, big time breakout year at Florida State. So I think he could potentially mix into the equation. Trey Benson, like you said, at running back, Blake Corum. It really depends. It sucks with Jonathan Brooks because I wish we could talk about him in this vein, but did suffer that midseason ACL tear. So I don't think he's in the mix. Guy like A.D. Mitchell has been talked about as a potential first-round pick, similar to that Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman archetype, big-bodied outside wide receiver. If he gets selected in the first round, he has to be considered. And, I mean, aside from that, I mean, I don't really feel like the NFL is going to take a liking to guys like Raheem Sanders or Braylon Allen, but if they do go higher than expected, I do think they're talented enough to work into this equation as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's been other college football risers this year, like Audric Estime and, Devin Neal and some of those guys too. So big class, deep class, I would say too. We're going to get some declarations and stuff in the next month or two. I think the declaration deadline's like January 15th or something like that. So we're going to get to learn which quarterbacks are in this class, which wide receivers are in this class and all that good stuff. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, make sure to check out our brand new Dynasty trade calculator over on flockfantasy.com. When you sign up over there, use promo code FSE for 30% off. Right now, you can use our Dynasty trade calculator and, determine kind of what players are valued among what players and all that kind of stuff, what makes a fair trade. We don't have rookie picks in there just yet, but we will be adding that in quite soon. So it'll be a full-fledged trade calculator that accounts for the fact that you're in a Superflex Dynasty league with 12 bench spots, or you're in a one quarterback Dynasty league where you only have to start 6 players. It's going to be the most advanced trade calculator you've ever used. I can definitely confirm that. So check that out if you're interested. That'll be down below in the description and the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.